Welcome everyone to Brain Training, an entire series dedicated to maximizing the brain-to-body connectivity. Here we will learn of powerful, yet for many, often unapplied brain properties or exercises that can help address physical and emotional challenges and even advance personal health goals. Hey everybody, I'm Dave Williams, and I'm proud to be the wingman for the one who's going to be piloting us through this journey. He's one of the world's leading behavioral technologists with more than 20 years applied research and development experience in the areas of behavioral and cognitive science of human motivation, activation, and resiliency. He is the chief technologist and founder of Gomo Health. He is Bob Gold. Bob, welcome.
Thanks.
Hey, man, this is important stuff. I just use a whole boatload of syllables. Break it down for us, for those people that are not in this space. What are we talking about here, and why is it important to everybody?
You know, everyone goes or tries to go to exercise their body, and this is about how do you exercise and practice getting better with your brain. Your brain takes up about 2% of your body weight, but uses 20% of the energy of your body and controls all your body movements, your emotions, and your rational thinking. That's what this is about, on how to get better and use your brain.
It's critical in everything, and that's really just to serve up for our listeners a bit of a flight plan for the entire series. Every episode is going to speak to optimizing the brain-to-body connectivity for desired results. Some shows will focus vertically on a specific health challenge like substance abuse or cancer recovery, and sometimes, like today, we're going to discuss broader issues and challenges. But regardless of the topic, Bob, there's a takeaway for everybody in each episode, right?
Absolutely. We're going to talk about tips, techniques, ideas on how to go to the gym for your brain as opposed to just going to the gym for your body.
I love it. Brain calisthenics. Today's episode is all about sports and the mind, as we want to examine the body-brain relationship and its impact on performance at the highest levels of human physical achievement.
Here's some interesting facts. Your physical senses, how does it communicate to the brain? And especially important in sports, right? Because how do you see something and then act on it? So the eyes transmit to the brain at 10 million bits per second up to the brain. Skin is 1 million bits per second. The ears are 100,000 bits per second. So your eyes can act a little faster, 10 times faster or so than your ears. Your smell is, again, 100,000 bits per second, and taste is 1,000 bits per second. So even walking takes more brain power than your conscious mind can handle. Your conscious mind can only handle 40 to 50 bits per second, but your unconscious brain, if it's in muscle memory, could do billions of operations per second. So the more you practice in sports, the more you visualize what you want to do, the more you get your brain set, you could take your physical senses and operate them at an accelerated pace. And that is critical in sports.
That's how you get to be the best at what you do.
And that's how you get to be an Olympic athlete, a pro athlete, or even just feel good about yourself and excel at what you do. Yes.
In each episode of Brain Training, Bob is going to share perspective and insights with a distinguished group of guests. They'll explore the body-brain connectivity from both a clinical understanding and a use case or application point of view. And in both instances, our guests will be at the highest levels in their respective fields. Hey, Donna de Varona, she set the swimming world on fire at an extremely young age and has been a record and barrier breaker and role model ever since. She turned Olympic gold and world records into a stellar and pioneering broadcasting career, and for decades has been a trailblazing figure as an advocate for gender equality and fairness in sports and society. Donna is currently a member of the United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee Board of Directors. Hey, Donna, welcome to Brain Training.
Well, thank you. It's really fun to be part of this discussion. I'm excited as we go along and through the really complex idea of what it means to train your brain for excellence.
And joining Donna is Dr. Alan Goldberg. With nearly 40 years of extensive field experience, Dr. Goldberg is an international authority on peak sports performance. He is the author of volumes of resources. He's helped professional athletes all over the world. He's helped world champions. He's helped national championship teams, coaches, coaching associations, helping them all overcome blockages and slumps and perform to their best and utmost potential. While he doesn't have any Olympic gold, rumor has it Dr. G is crazy good on the tennis court and holds a karate black belt. Dr. Goldberg, welcome to Brain Training.
Well, thanks very much. Appreciate being here. This should be pretty fun. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, so question, let's start with Donna. Donna, when you were a young athlete, what is something you did, a practice, a routine, an idea that didn't work out, that either embarrassed you or just didn't get the results you wanted?
Well, I think every athlete goes through a time in his or her career where you're going to have a day where you just can't perform or you don't perform to your expectations. But I think the worst day that I remember is when I swam in a local meet and I was tired and I gave up. And I got out of the pool and my father, who was a great football player, said, "Well, how does that feel?" And that's when I was embarrassed because I let myself down. And I said, "Dad, I never want to have this feeling again. It's awful. I mean, if I don't do well and I try my hardest, great. But I actually gave up in this race, and I'll never do it again." And it was a great lesson, and it was a lesson learned in a minor meet, not a major meet.
You know, that's fascinating. In fact, when Alan gets into it, he has a lot to say on that very subject. But Alan, before we do that, what about yourself? What's a technique or something you tried that just didn't work?
Again, I was a tennis player growing up, started when I was 12. And I have to go to college to find a life-changing kind of lesson. And I was in the finals of conference championships my first year when I was a sophomore. They didn't let freshmen play varsity back in the day when I went to school because they had this twisted belief that academics was more important than sports. So they let freshmen, they kept freshmen off of varsity. Just a little sick humor for you. But I'm in the finals. I'm one game away from winning the conference championship in front of about 350 people. And as I'm toweling off in between points, getting ready, for my serve to serve out the match, I hear a commotion, and I notice over to the side of the court, two of the guys from the host school were carrying out a 14-foot table loaded with trophies. And there was one trophy on that table that was the biggest, and that was for the number one singles player. That was my trophy. To make a long, very painful story quite short, I got too excited, started thinking about winning, and I stole defeat from the closing jaws of victory in front of all these people. It was humiliating for me. I've never had an experience that was that devastating. And basically that helped me win the conference championship the next 2 years. Because my belief is we build success, I should say, on a solid foundation of failure. And I figured out after the fact what I had done wrong. And for any athlete, doing well means you need to keep your focus in the moment on what's going on and not on your thoughts. And especially not on your thoughts about outcome. Because when we focus on outcome, we get ourselves into hot water. And that's what I ended up doing in that particular match. And I never did it again after that.
I always tell my friends that are competitors, you never get into an event not to lose. You have to keep your eyes ahead on winning. Because if you enter something not to lose, most likely you will. So I always tried to run scared. I always felt even if I held the world record by 6 seconds, that somebody in lane 8 could, if they were hungry enough, they could knock me off. So I never took anything for granted, especially after that time when I gave up on that one race.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, both of you are mentioning things. The topic that's interesting I want to discuss is, does the brain detect or create reality? Like if you watch the Olympics, Donna, which you were in, of course, and you saw Michael Phelps before the race and the camera zeroed in on him and he had his headsets on, his eyes closed, and what he was doing was going through a 3-part exercise in his brain. He was blanking it out. He was envisioning the race, and then he was envisioning his strokes to win the race, and that's what he wanted to control his whole mind. So, Donna, let's start with you. What did you learn to do to nudge your brain to believe in the reality you wanted to create?
Well, you mentioned Michael Phelps, and he had that exercise for the whole day. He had a certain time when he wanted to dive in the pool, and if it was too early, he waited because I think he gained his confidence through routine. Now, for me, I'm 13 on my way to the Olympics, right? I'm just climbing the ladder, and every night before I went to bed, I looked for a star, and I wished on it that I would do my best. And then I would imagine my race. I would imagine sitting in the waiting room, which is the psych room. I'd imagine walking out on the deck. I'd imagine my start. I'd imagine how I would feel on every lap. Mine was 400 meters. When you're a swimmer, it's really about ignoring the pain because we push through pain thresholds every day as swimmers. That's how we get better. And then I would imagine not so much getting up and winning and standing on the victory stand. I would keep my mind focused on the last 10 meters of, finishing for the wall. And I think that's really helped my mind train my muscles in my body and help me, shut out the pressure of expectation to win, because by the time I was 17, I was on covers of magazines and, I was expected to win. And I didn't want to ruin my moment by, getting caught up in the PR. I had to do it my own way.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So for the audience, just to tell you, how many neurons do you have in your brain? Does anyone know? But the answer is it's 100 billion neurons. So almost as many stars in the galaxy, and there's thousands of connections. So some scientists believe your brain can process 100 billion operations per second, but your conscious mind can only process 40 to 50 bits per second. So a lot of what Don is talking about is how to block things out, because your brain could go in so many directions, and how can you put it into muscle memory to control it? And I think, to get to Alan, I think a lot of what you work on is similar stuff around people who've gone through various trauma and how you help them. Could you talk about that?
Sure. Really a lot of, when an athlete performs well, they're in what I call their hindbrain. They're in the part of the brain that is controlled by muscle memory. Okay, and it's developed obviously by repetition, by doing things over and over again. When athletes get into trouble, their focus is more in their front brain, sometimes known as neocortex, the thinking part of us. Okay, and when you're in your front brain, when you've got a lot of thoughts going on before or during a performance, what's going to end up happening is you're going to get anxious, your muscles are going to tighten, your breathing's going to get faster and shallower, and you're going to inadvertently set yourself up to fail. Okay? And the way, one of the things I teach athletes is to have an awareness of the part of their brain that they're in pre-performance, and then how to switch. And the main way that I work with kids and other athletes, younger kids and older athletes, to get in their hindbrain is by learning to control their focus of concentration. This is before a performance, like, again, with swimming before a race, or during the race. And when I'm performing and my focus is on my thoughts, now we're always going to be thinking, because our front brain is constantly making a lot of noise before and during. And the issue is to train yourself, and you can, this is an elite level skill, to let the thoughts go. But the only way you can do that is if you have something that you can focus on that's more in the hindbrain realm, which is feel related. So pre-performance, if I could use swimming as an example, Donna, I mean, before the race, I'm behind the blocks, I'm going to focus on my pre-performance routine, the feeling of stretching, jumping up and down, maybe slowing my breathing down, whatever I tend to do. And then during the race, I'm going to be focusing on the feel of my movement. And that's not how much I'm hurting. That's not, I feel like I'm going slow. Those are thoughts. What I'm talking about is, pulling a lot of water, staying long, my kick, that sort of thing. The way we get into our hindbrain is by learning to control our focus, and we want to keep our focus on what we're doing. And sometimes in other sports like basketball or baseball, that focus is external on the action, on what I call seeing, reading, and reacting. I see, like in baseball or softball, I'm a hitter. I see the ball coming in. I instinctively read the pitch, and I react, which involves no front brain activity, no thinking, happens in a nanosecond, and it's all hindbrain. So basically what I'm doing with athletes is really trying to teach them to have an awareness of the part of the brain they're in before and during performance. And if they're in the front part of the brain, the thinking part, how to get back into the hindbrain.
Well, I think when you do the hindbrain, I never actually referred to it that, but it's called focus or being in the zone. You don't really hear anything. You're walking out on the deck. I use breathing a lot because my front mind starts taking over, I have to breathe and relax. And I even say that to people that play golf if they have a bad shot. Just take a breath and, take your hands in front of you and do some sort of gesture that brings down your energy and focus. I do remember, however, when I was on my way to a world record in Peru, the stands going crazy, and that really inspired me. It inspired me to go faster and to feel the water. We talked about extension and feeling the water, and that way you don't deal with the pain. But there's all these little routines. I had a false start before my race, which is illegal now, but I wasn't then. I needed to bob 4 times and breathe to relax, and that was my routine. Because you talked about Michael Phelps, he had his routine, and you talk about some of these athletes that have these little quirks before they swing a golf club or they get in the water. That's a way of, I think, training your mind so that you stay focused on the race at hand or the competition in front of you.
Yeah, it's interesting. Donna talks about feeling the water. So your eyes see in 2 dimensions, but your brain could visualize and think in 3 dimensions. So the idea that we're talking about here is, how do you manage or control your brain? How do you practice imagination that sees yourself in certain lights? Just as an example, in 2017, the best chess player in the world had a tournament in Vegas. He played 50 people, 50 matches blindfolded in his brain.
Wow.
At the same time. 50
That's another brain.
Matches. So
that's amazing.
And just to bring it down to earth, like when I wrestled in high school, we were taught a technique right before the match to blank your brain out and just see black, see nothing for 60 seconds. Well, I could tell you it takes almost a year to do that, to figure that out. And then you imagine yourself with all types of moves, right? So, Alan, in your training, when you work with these various athletes, how do you get to use their imagination? How do you get them to focus on blanking things out? And how does that work in the brain?
Well, a lot of what I'm doing is really making them much more aware of where their focus goes and changing their relationship with their thinking. There's a lot of people in my field who teach things like thought stopping. And if you have negative thoughts, you replace them with positive ones. And to me, thought stopping, trying to stop yourself from thinking, is an exercise in futility. It's like asking yourself, is it better to chase your tail clockwise or counterclockwise? In either direction, you're not going to get your tail, And so the trick is really to learn to recognize when thoughts pop up and to have a neutral reaction. The elite level skill is when negative thinking and doubts come up, which happen for a lot of athletes right before a big performance, just to understand that's normal. And the job immediately is to get into the hindbrain. And the way you do that, again, is by finding other things that you focus on. And mostly these are the routines before a performance, the routines that you can then focus on the feel of what you're doing. You're staying out of your thought process by getting more in your body, because peak performance happens when we're centered, when we're in the moment. People talk, and Don, I think you mentioned that flow state. When you're totally focused on what you're doing in the moment, everything else fades away along with the thoughts. So you can't stop your thoughts, but you can train yourself to have a very neutral response and an immediate switch of focus to the feel of your movement, okay, or to the pitch, then that next pitch coming in, or whatever sport you're in, whatever you're about to do.
Yeah, it's interesting. So people who are having any sort of questioning in their mind or frustration or been through any levels of anxiety ruminate at 3 to 5 times more than the average person. So your mind goes to negative. We all do that. Oh, my friend's talking about me. They're saying all these things when they're not. So it does take the type of training that Alan's saying is, how do you box that in your brain, and how do you practice to do that, right? So some of these techniques we're talking about visualization, about focus, some of the things Donna talked about, are things people do in their everyday life that they need to focus on, right? So, Donna, did you, outside of when you were practicing, where did your mind go, your brain, back to your sport when you weren't doing your sport, when you were with other people, and how did you manage that?
Well, I usually tried to have a very varied life. I mean, I never believed that when I was training and I had the support of my parents that my life should be all swimming, because you need to give your mind a rest and your body a rest from the daily practices twice a day. I ran for office in my school. I was in the school play. A lot of parents ridiculed me for that. I had to block it out. But that was the way that I could cope with the pressure and the expectation that every day I get in the pool, I had to deal with the pain and then train my mind not to. I would like to bring up a story, though, about my relationship with Mark Spitz during the 72 Olympics as he was going for, 7 gold, 7 world records. Just about every night before one of his races, he and I would walk on the pool deck. And before his very last race, he said to me, "I'm really concerned. I don't think I can swim this last race." And I said, "Why, Mark?" And I think this goes to also talking out your fears so you can block them away. He said, "Because if I swim 6 and win 6, I'll be a hero. If I swim 7 and lose 1, I'll be a failure." And I just looked at him and I said, "Mark, now that you said it, you can put that away. And by the way, you've got the psych going. No, people are standing up at the block thinking, how can I ever beat Mark Spitz?" So, these were all learning blocks with me. Unfortunately, we didn't have people to consult with us or mentor us on all these little mind games. We kind of discovered that along the way. But I just remember these little moments I had and what I learned from them.
But Bob, this is something that people can have takeaways from this in everyday life. In fact, there's Donna was just talking about games that can be played as a way of making sure that you are at peak performance. My father used to play Scrabble and the New York Times, and I do Sudoku, and isn't that kind of brain calisthenics?
Yeah. brain fitness is all types of things you could do. And out there, if you go to YouTube and all these places, there's a million brain games. But just to have a little fun with Dave, let's see how good he is with a simple game. So, Dave, I'm going to ask you a question. Let's see how long it takes you to answer, if you can answer.
All right.
How can 8 plus 8 equal 4?
How can 8 plus 8 equals 4?
Tough one, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the answer when it's time, 8 a.m. plus 8 hours equals 4 p.m. So the point of this was,
Okay.
the point was to have a little fun now with Dave.
Yeah.
But the point, there's many different types of brain games that you can do and things. Alan, do you work on different types of techniques, what we're calling for today brain games with your athletes? And then Donna, you too, think about that. But Alan, go ahead.
Yeah, I will do different kinds of imagery exercises and different kinds of relaxation techniques that involve imagery. Like one of them, for example, is I have athletes create a resource room. And what that is, in your imagination, you come up with what I would call a safe place. It could be a real place, an imaginary place, a place you've been to before, a place you haven't. It could be a combination of the two. And what I will have an athlete do is practice regularly going to that place in their imagery. And also one of the key elements here in training your brain to really kind of be affected by this kind of imagery is to make it as vivid as possible. In other words, adding all the senses, sight, smell, hearing, even kinesthetics. And so I will have athletes go to this place, whether it's indoors, outdoors, at a beach, and then populate it with, specific things. Like, I had a professional triathlete that I worked with, and the place she went to was this beach where she grew up in Rhode Island off the coast. And she constructed in her mind's eye this one-room cabin surrounded by 360 degrees of glass all the way around, so she see the ocean, the sand dunes, the salt marsh behind. And in that resource room, we had her create an area where she would do imagery. So this is imagery within imagery, where she would mentally practice for her upcoming performances or upcoming races. And then there was another thing in her resource room, which we called an energy machine. What's an energy machine? It's where you get energy. You get confidence from it. You get a second wind from it. And it can be anything you want. It could be some liquid that you drink. When it goes through you, everything lights up. And all of this is in your mind's eye. And there are some relaxation exercises I use using the same kind of principles, where, you're having athletes mentally practice this stuff over and over again to the point where it becomes pretty real for them if they do it enough times. And the trick with this stuff is if you do it enough times when you're not under pressure, these exercises will stay with you when you are under pressure. For example, with swimming, like you're in the ready room before the finals of the huge race, and there's all this pressure, but it'll stay with you.
It's interesting. In order to do those things, like in the last Olympics, when the 15-year-old Russian girl was disqualified because she took the drugs, what that was meant to do is speed up her heart, speed up some of her body functions, which would increase her ability to make quicker decisions in the brain. So it would feed more activity into the brain so she could decide, can I do the triple axel? Should I do the jump or not very quickly? Because when you're in that type of race or event, you have to make decisions quickly. And that's why athletes, just like all of us, need schedules, routines, and practice, because you have to move it from the conscious brain to muscle memory. So I'd like to talk about that a little bit, because we're really trying to help people figure out how to practice brain fitness, right? So, Donna, your practice routines or your schedules, routines, how did you manage your life being a elite athlete in your daily life from a practice, schedule, routine perspective?
Well, it was pretty much managed for me. I started at 13, and I did have to, had some mistakes. I mean, I could train 2 sessions a day in high intensity. I tried to go to 3 because my biggest rival was in the pool with me, and she could do 3, but I couldn't. I had to realize that I had to individualize my training routine, and good coaches do that. Not everybody can be trained the same or think the same. It's unique to you. So it also depended on, access to the pool, because in our day it was very hard to find what I call big water, 50-meter pools. Then if I had a lot of homework, I learned to, really focus time management. I was much better as a student when I had a lot of demands as an athlete, because I had to really focus on getting everything done. But I'd like to ask a question. It's about the athlete that chokes and coming back. I can think of Dan Jansen, who fell during 2 consecutive Olympics, and finally in 1994, his 3rd Olympics, won the gold medal. And my feeling was that maybe it was that he'd been coached by another Olympic champion, Peter Muller, who won the 1,000 in 76 and then came back to coach Dan Jansen in 1994 to a win. How damaging could it have been for Dan Jansen if he'd left the sport without ever overcoming the label of being a choker?
Yeah, that's a great question. Alan, what do you think about that?
Well, my feeling is if that's the last experience that you've had in an event like that in front of the world, I mean, that could be devastating.
So then you look at other examples like Simone Biles, which, had the twisties and walked off the court. And some people said, the old routine, she should have gotten back up and performed anyway. But it could have been life or death for her if she hadn't. By leaving the team, she opened up an opportunity for somebody else, and now she's back. And I know the USOPC, the Olympic Committee, really did help her with some support as far as mentoring. So when you do choke, what's a good way back, and what does it mean?
Yeah, so 2 comments on that. So in behavior management, the thing I work on, there's 8 factors in your own self-believability and your ability to do something. So 2 of the most important ones are trust and credibility. So self-trust is I will not put myself in harm's way, and self-credibility is I can further my cause. So to your point, he probably felt he could win the race, but now he didn't trust himself, right? So all the stuff we've been talking about and the techniques, whether he switched the coach, as you suggested, and the techniques Alan suggested have to do with practice, schedules, routines, moving stuff to muscle memory. So when he's going into that last turn or he's in the race, his brain is not imagining him falling or being fearful, and he could cut out that noise. And I think that's a lot of what we've been talking about. So for folks listening today, I think the key is, it's kind of how we started, is you go to the gym for your body. These are things that you can practice, whether they be meditations, brain games, visualization, using your imagination to create reality in your mind of what will happen when you're competing in a sport or you're performing in any aspect of your life, like work. If you could imagine it, it can happen.
Hey, speaking of imagining things, and for both of you, is music a device? And Bob, in what you do, is music a device? Because I have some examples of some music that can be inspiring for a performer, can be inspiring for someone in the audience, and motivate them to address their own challenges and physical goals too.
Yeah, well, music is a reflection of society and what we all go through. And this is a radio show, so music is perfect. And I think people tend to hear the clips that you sing over and over again, but what is the author, the writer of these songs trying to say? And I think when we examine it, we'll play a little music, we'll examine it. It's a lot of what we've been talking about today actually is reflected in the song, and I don't think people realize that.
Okay, listeners, get ready to be inspired.
I get up and nothing gets me down. You got mistakes. I've made a few. I've had my shells and kicks in my face, but I've come through. The beats are going on, on. We are the champions, my friends, and we'll keep on fighting till the end. We are the champions. We are the champions. No time for losers, 'cause we are the champions of the world.
Yeah,
Some classics there,
Just some
Bob.
comments, and I want to throw it out to Alan and Donna. The first one by Van Halen sounds like he was coached by Alan, right? He goes, I get up and nothing gets me down. You got to roll with the punches to get to what's real. So, that takes training, mind training. So if you listen to the words, and then Survivor, the line I thought was fascinating was, and the last known survivor stalks his prey in the night. That goes to practice, right? I remember Michael Jordan, carried a basketball to bed most of the days and carried a basketball around school. And so he was kind of the last survivor in every practice, right? So, and the one in Queen, it's very interesting. I've done my sentence, but committed no crime. And bad mistakes, I made a few. So I think that's a lot of what athletes feel at the time. Donna just relayed the story about Mark Spitz and walking around. I don't think I could race the last one. It's like, I've done my sentence, right? And, how do I get through this? So I think that's what we've all been talking about. And I think music brings it out. So, Donna, any thoughts on listening to some of these words and the things we just talked about?
I listen to music all the time. When I went on trips for swimming, I would take one of those portable record players and bring the vinyl records. I'm dating myself. But I always had music. And if you think about how we covered sports at ABC when Tim and I worked there, music's always in the background. When I was in labor for 23 hours with my son, I listened to Barbra Streisand for 23 hours to get me through it.
Was he a pain in the ass after delivery? Because that's a long time.
No. But, I think music's just so much part of it. I swim 3 or 4 days a week now, and I listen to music. I have a wonderful friend who loads up tunes for me. But, no, I think it's very much a part of at least my sports experience. I really needed the music.
And Alan, what do you have to say?
Music is very hindbrain, okay? It really connects us to that non-thinking muscle memory part. And, of course, what's key is the right kind of music. So I work with a lot of athletes whose nervous systems before they perform are way too overactivated. They're too up. They're too excited. That story that I told that I didn't get into the detail, I was so excited about winning. The last thing I would have needed at that point was to be listening to Queen singing "We're the Champions," because I was certainly not the champion. I got a very small trophy for the runner-up. But so music is an individual thing, and it depends on the issues that the athlete is struggling with pre-performance. But it's a great way to distract us from that front brain thinking. It keeps us in our hind brain. It gets us out of our head, and it's inspiring. All three of those songs are in. You can get chills listening to them. But if my nervous system going into a performance was way overamped, and I listened to those songs, that might have pushed me over the edge. So it's kind of situational,
Absolutely. And, it's interesting. Some of the latest science, which is just developing, is that there's music which could put you in certain moods, And there's ways of creating tones, tunes, decibels, frequencies that could affect the biorhythms of the body in a bigger way. So it's a very interesting area, and we're going to actually have a future show on the brain and music dedicated to that effort.
Hey, we want to just turn on our listeners to how they can follow you guys. Donna, how if people wanted to follow you, where would they go?
I don't know. Maybe they got to come back to you. I'm kind of under the radar these days, behind the scenes with the U.S. Olympic Committee, doing the work behind the scenes to field our best teams. And I've been mentoring a lot of women through a new program called Journey and Champion Women. I guess that's my best answer.
Yeah, love it. You're amazing. And Dr. Goldberg, how do people find you?
They can get me on my website, which is competitiveedge.com, which is the two words joined together with only one E in between them. So it's competitivedge.com.
Perfect. Hey, we want to thank you guys for joining us.